Welcome to another video from Demystifying Proposals. Our mission is to break down the proposal process and make proposals make sense. In this video, we touch on Proposal Development 101, a high-level review of proposal development in government contracting. If you learned something from this video, please hit thumbs up and like the video. You can also subscribe to our channel and click on the bell to be notified of future videos. Please leave a comment if you have anything to share as well. In this section of the presentation, we'll talk about the basics. Here we present a typical proposal schedule for a 30-day turn. On day 1, the RFP drops. On days 1 and 2, you do things like organize your kickoff and maybe even hold your kickoff early on in the process. You want to start the questions development process. So you want to get a document out to everybody that they can start to gather their questions as they read the RFP. You want to develop your outline and your compliance matrix. You develop your outline and your compliance matrix so that you can sort of check what your outline looks like based on what your compliance matrix looks like, and vice versa. And then most importantly, you want to set up your schedule as quickly as possible. What's going to happen on what days, and you need to make sure that as part of your kickoff, everybody is aware of that schedule. The next thing that's going to happen is your pink team. Now, the pink team timing will depend on how much preparation you've been able to do before the RFP dropped and how much time you actually have for the whole proposal process. If you have a 30-day turn, pink team usually happens somewhere in days 5 to 7. You're also going to do your questions vetting process and your questions submitting process. You need to follow the instructions in the RFP for the timing of when the questions have to be submitted. And you usually hold a questions vetting session sometime a day or two before that. Next, you'll have your green team 1 and your red team. Those usually happen about the same time. Your green team 1 will include a preliminary look at pricing. And that's why it's good time to do it at red team, because at red team, you often have your solution solidified enough that you can do pricing in a meaningful way. Your red team, again, your timing of that will depend on, again, how much preparation you've had to do and how long your actual timing of your proposal schedule looks like. But usually those things happen around days 12 to 14. Your gold team will be the next thing after red team, and the timing of that will depend again on how pink team and red team went and where you are in your proposal schedule. It will also depend on your Q&A from the government. You may not want to do a gold team until you actually have your Q&A because you may need to change things. So sometimes you want to hold off on your gold team. The green team 2 takes place pretty close to the end of the proposal process. Again, that should be a fairly complete pricing exercise. So you should have your pricing pretty much complete, and you should have your cost narrative pretty complete. Your white glove and production takes place 1 or 2 days before the end of the proposal turn, so in days 28 or 29. And then day 30 would be your submission. You actually want to make sure that you submit at least 2 hours before the deadline, perhaps even more. In an ideal situation, if you can submit the day before, that's even better. Here are some of the key elements of the proposal development process. First, daily stand-ups or core team meetings. At your daily stand-ups, you review the outline and you review with the authors where they are in writing to the outline and meeting the deadlines for the reviews. So you end up reviewing the schedule at the same time. Then the next thing is the questions and answers process. There you draft and then you review the questions from the proposal team. You want to analyze the answers to questions when you get those back from the government to ensure compliance and to assess for clues as to how competitors may be bidding. You can learn a lot from the Q&A. Then there are the color team reviews. We'll talk about those in more detail later in this training. Color team reviews typically include pink team, red team, gold team, and white glove. And then there's preparing for the actual submission. So a typical federal proposal RFP includes sections A through M. Now, they may not call them A through M. Different departments may just have numbers, or they may use just labels. But the elements that you need to look at from a proposal management perspective are the statement of work or the performance work statement, because that's what the government is asking your company to bid against, the work that they want you to do. Section L, which is the instruction to offers, and that's your Bible as a proposal manager. That's how the proposal needs to be put together. Fonts, page restrictions, all of those things are found in Section L or instructions to offers. Section M is the evaluation criteria. That's how the government is going to define their scoring. And so it's really important to take that into account as you're developing your proposal. And also you should take that into account as you're doing your reviews. You should have your reviewers grade your proposal in the same way that the government is going to be grading your proposal. One of the things that's most important for proposals is to remember that proposals are scored and not read. And what we mean by that is that while proposals should read well, they should be edited and formatted and clear, it's more important that they follow the rules laid out in the RFP. You aren't allowed to move sections around just because it would read better. A good proposal is laid out in the same order as the proposal instructions in Section L. It incorporates the evaluation criteria from Section M, which hopefully match the proposal instructions in Section L. Note that if there are elements in Section L that are not mentioned in Section M, they must still be included. And if there are elements in Section M that are not mentioned in Section L, they also must be added. The other thing a good proposal should do is address all the tasks in the statement of work or the performance work statement, which is usually found in Section C. This can be particularly challenging if the SOW or the PWS is longer than the page limits from Section L. However, Section L rules. One of the challenges of proposals is making sure Section C is addressed somewhere within the Section L requirements. And then the last thing a good proposal has to do is add the secret sauce, whatever that is, to make it responsive and compelling. So what is the benefit of your solution's features? What are your win themes? What are your discriminators? Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the government evaluation process. So when we're talking about proposals, we talk about compliant and responsive and compelling. The government, that doesn't mean anything to them. That's not information that they don't think that way, except for compliance. They do actually think about compliance. So one of the first things that they're going to do when they sit down to evaluate your proposal is they're going to look at the proposal instructions. They're going to look at your proposal, and they're going to make sure that you've addressed everything they've asked you to address in the way that they've asked you to address it. If you have something that's non-compliant, you will generally be kicked out of any further review. And then they will divide the proposal between a technical evaluation panel and a cost evaluation team. The technical evaluation panel reviews any proposals that are considered compliant against the evaluation criteria, that is Section M. So prior to the kickoff of the TEPS meeting, the TEP chair will create a technical evaluation score sheet that the TEP will use to document their assessment of the proposal. And they'll use the evaluation criteria to develop that score sheet. So this is part of why we say proposals are scored and not read. So the score sheet is the statement of work requirements, the proposal instructions, and the evaluation criteria. So they look at all of those things. And then each member of the team will do an evaluation, and then they'll come together and they'll come up with an overall score for each proposal across the technical evaluation panel. And then the contracting officer will use those evaluations as the basis for their source selection document. The cost evaluation panel reviews the cost proposals for things like cost realism and risks and any assumptions that the offerer may have made in developing their cost pricing. So their process is different, but in parallel to the technical evaluation panel. So in the government evaluation, they use terminology strengths, weaknesses, and deficiencies. We generally use the terminology of like win themes and discriminators. They're kind of the same thing, but it's important that you understand how the government actually scores proposals. And we've been trying to sort of shift away from win themes into strengths. So most technical and management approaches are evaluating, like I said, based on strengths, weaknesses, and deficiencies. The proposal's goal is to have as many significant strengths as possible and as few weaknesses as possible. So strengths are things that the government sees as reasons to hire this particular company, right? So they can come from your win themes or they can come from your features and benefits, right? What's the features of our solution and what are the benefits to the customer, to the TEP for doing that work the way that we're going to do it? Or they come from a really clear and structured approach, right? We're going to do X, we're going to do Y, we're going to do Z. It's very easy for the government to follow how you're going to do the work, and it's very clear and structured. And then strengths can also come from your proof points. Where have you done this work before? And what was the outcome? If the outcome was super good, you got really good, excellent CPARs, or you were able to save X amount of money, or you were able to do the work that much faster. All of those things are proof points, and those can be seen as strengths as the government is evaluating your proposal. Weaknesses come from things that are unsubstantiated, unclear, and undefined. So if you make a claim that you're the world's best at something, you better be able to prove that you're actually the world's best at something. Otherwise, it just falls flat. It becomes an unsubstantiated claim, and it might end up as a weakness. If your solution is not clear, if the government can't figure out how they get from X to Y to Z, then they may not be able to understand what your solution actually is. And that'll be a weakness. And the same thing with an approach, right? If you're particularly like on a management side, right? If you are not presenting your management approach in a clear way, they've asked you to talk about how you're going to manage the team. Maybe there's lots of different elements to the team. There's lots of different tasks and different people are going to be doing different things at different times. If you can't present a management approach that clearly explains how that's going to happen, that could be a weakness. Now, deficiencies are the worst version of weaknesses. So you can have a significant weakness and then you can have a deficiency. And a deficiency means that it's just they can't see anything good. And one deficiency can kill a proposal's chance of winning. So you really want to make sure that you have significant strengths, really good win themes, features and benefits, clear approaches, proof points. And then you want to avoid saying anything that is unclear, unsubstantiated, undefined, so that you hopefully don't have many weaknesses or any weaknesses, and certainly no deficiencies. So this slide presents how the government actually defines those terms. So I used them on the previous slide. I didn't define them, but this is actual definitions from an actual evaluation, right? So strength is an aspect of an offerer's proposal that has merit or exceed the specified performance or capability requirements, right? So it's more than just what they asked you for. It takes it to a little bit higher level. A weakness is a flaw in the proposal that increases the risk, right? So the government is always looking at, will this offer be able to do the work, and will they be able to do it well? Because that's what they need. They need you to do the work. And if you can't do the work well, then there's a risk to them that you're going to be unsuccessful. And that's not a good thing for anybody. And then deficiency is just a material failure. So you were uncompliant, non-compliant, you have a lot of significant weaknesses, and that can lead to a high risk of failure. And they just can't get past that, and they feel like your performance is probably going to be unacceptable. Here we list the definitions of the color team reviews. We've divided color team reviews into two categories. One are reviews that include quote unquote outside reviewers. That is, folks who are not part of the proposal team who come in and give you an objective perspective. They may be somebody from an adjacent project, or they may be somebody who's a business leader from another part of the organization, somebody who's familiar enough with the content to be able to do an effective review, but who hasn't been involved in the actual process of developing the content. So for Pink Team, generally speaking, we want about 80% content developed. So at this point in the process, you're very early on, but hopefully you are tailoring your blue team drafts. Hopefully you've had a chance pre-RFP to do some content development, and now you want to tailor what you did in your blue team drafts to match what the final RFP actually says. Authors should have written to every requirement. So some content sections may be only outlined, not full text, but some sections are hopefully full prose. You want to make sure your solution is documented. You may want to make sure that your staffing is defined. You want to make sure that your resumes and your past performances are detailed. They may not be complete, but they should be there so that the reviewers understand what you're planning to use. Your win themes and customer focus points should be known, and they should be outlined in the sections. It should be easy to see where you're going to put in your win themes and where you're going to put in your focus points. Your Pink Team drafts should be drafty enough to be able to change direction if needed, but substantive enough to let reviewers understand the path you intend to take. Red Team usually includes about 90% content and close to final graphics and tables. At Red Team, you should have a pretty complete proposal that shows all of the elements you intend to have in your proposal in the final version, though some may not be entirely finished, 90%. Any holes in the Red Team drafts should still have clear outlines so that the author shows what they intend to do for the reviewers. Sections with no content are unacceptable at Red Team. So when you get down to Gold Team and White Glove, you're probably going to limit the number of people who are in your review to the people who are on the proposal team, those who truly understand what your solution is and your win themes and can make those things really come out clearly in the proposal. So at Gold Team, you should be pretty much done. You should be at 95% complete. Gold Team is usually scheduled for only a few days before submission. You want to have a unified document with all of the parts and pieces included. You want to have a technical edit done so that you can not be distracted by any extraneous words or weird phrasing. you want to include your pricing volume in your goal team so that you can compare your pricing and your technical and make sure that you're addressing anything in pricing that needs to align to what you've said in your technical. The proposal content should be complete, as I said, with the possible exception of some graphics or maybe information that's still coming in from partners. White glove is a 100% complete proposal. And the white glove review is really only to ensure that the document is clean, that is, no typos, all graphics are final, and you really should, at that point, have no other changes made. It should just be a review to make sure that you've caught everything that you needed to change from Gold Team and everything is ready to go and ready to be submitted. This is just a very high level view of how you do a pink team and a red team from an execution perspective as the proposal manager. It's not in detail, obviously, it's just a single slide, but I wanted to give you a general sense of what you would do. So you work with the proposal team to make sure that the documents are going to be ready for the review. And the way you do that is you have daily stand-ups with everybody and you reiterate the schedule uh, at those daily stand-ups. When are the drafts due? You need to make very clear to everybody as you're going along, where are we? What's the next milestone? Then you want to do, as the proposal manager, you want to review those drafts. You want to make sure that the content is pink team or red team ready. If it's not, then you need to discuss that with the capture manager. Maybe you need to reschedule the pink or the red team, or maybe you won't have those particular sections reviewed. But that's very, you don't want to do that a lot, but you do want to make sure that the content is in good shape at pink team or red team, because if it's not, then the reviewers are just going to tear it apart, and that's not good for the authors and that's not good for you. And so you need to make sure that you're monitoring the drafts as they're being developed. Once the drafts have been released by the authors for the pink team and the red team, then the proposal manager or somebody on the proposal team should do a preliminary edit, just a really high level, fix the grammar, run the grammar check, do a basic format. And again, this is all so that the documents look clean and the reviewers aren't distracted by typos and things like that. They can concentrate on what the actual content is, rather than being distracted by things that look bad. Then as the proposal manager, you want to have a kickoff. Sometimes you don't have time for a kickoff, and then what I generally do is just prepare the slides for a kickoff and then send that out with the documents themselves. But in the kickoff, what you want to do is talk about the opportunity, but you also want to remind the reviewers of the timeline, right? The document will come out at this time. You have this long to review. Comments are due by this time. And then you usually have some kind of a SWOT PowerPoint slide that you ask them to develop. What are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? So that's just standard, so that you have both the inline comments in the document, but you also have a high level view of each reviewer's assessment of where you are. So that might be the red, yellow, green, blue, or it might be just a score of 1 to 10, however your company does it. But you want to make sure that you get both a high level assessment and the detailed comments. You need to monitor the inputs as the pink and the red team are going on, right? So usually it's done in a centralized repository like SharePoint. And you need to make sure that your reviewers are going in there, they're actually making comments, they're actually doing the things that you've asked them to do. And if you see somebody's not actually doing those things, you may need to call them or email them and find out what's going on, and offer any help you can. You do want to make sure that the authors, when you have your debrief, you invite your authors to the debrief, and the authors are invited to ask clarifying questions of the reviewers, but they shouldn't argue with the reviewers, right? The reviewers will, I mean, the reviewers are going to be hopefully pretty hard on your document, right? They're thinking about it from the government's perspective. The government doesn't know this company, right? So they're trying to take a really objective point of view. And so you want your authors to listen and take it all in, but not to and ask questions, right? If there's something that doesn't make sense to them or they're not sure how to recover from the comment, but you don't want them to argue, like to tell the person that they're completely wrong or they have no idea what they're talking about. You do that privately later in during the recovery process. So gold team execution will be a little bit different than the pink and the red team. And that's because, as I keep saying, you're further along in the process and you're only going to have a handful of people in the gold team doing the review. So you want to make sure that your documents are obviously ready to review. Your authors are still involved at this point in the process, so they'll do the recovery from red team to gold team. So at your daily stand-ups, check in with them, see where they are. You, as the proposal manager, want to continue to review the drafts, make sure the content is gold team ready. And then once you've released the documents have been released by the authors for gold team, you need to do all those things that you did at pink team, right? You need to do an edit, you need to do a formatting before you send the document out for the gold team to review. Your gold team documents should be 95% complete. So hopefully there's not a lot of content missing. Hopefully your documents are clean in terms of editing and formatting because you really want this to be sort of gold standard type of proposals. And then you want to do those same things that you did at Red Team in terms of having a kickoff and telling the reviewers what kind of timeline they have and comments are due in the document. And you want to SWOT PowerPoint at the same time. But in this case, you need to make it very clear to the reviewers that comments should be minimal and they should only be things that are actually wrong, right? No longer happy to glad, no longer are we don't have time at this point in the process to wholesale change our solution, to wholesale swap out information. So the gold team should really be what can we do? What are those final polishing things we need to do before the proposal is really done? Again, you need to monitor that people are doing the reviews. You need to help them if there's any challenges there. And then because your authors are not involved in gold team recovery, you don't need to have them in the debrief for gold team. So your proposal manager should take control of the proposal for the remainder of the process. You really only probably have 2 or 3 days left at this point. And so any final changes that need to be done, any of those hopefully small comments that need to be addressed, the proposal manager takes that on and does that. But you need to make sure that you've communicated that to the authors and be sure, obviously, to thank them for their hard work. They've done a lot of good things for you, hopefully, at this point. So be sure to thank them and tell them where you are in the process and that you've got it from here. When I first started doing proposal management, white gloves were literally sitting around a table and everybody looked at the document at the same time in hard copy. It was literally like you printed it out and you looked at it as with white gloves, essentially. It was that's where the name comes from. These days, white gloves tend to be a little bit more virtual, but they're still conducted in sort of a real-time fashion. So what you might want to do is have everybody in a conference room, or what you might do is a virtual meeting with everybody on the phone in whatever system you use, Zoom or Google Meet or Teams or whatever, and you project the white glove version of the proposal and you walk through it so that you can show people exactly what the proposal is going to look like. At this point, comments really have to be only things that are absolutely wrong. So there's a bad page break. There's a graphic that moved and it's not in the right place anymore. Your graphics aren't numbered consecutively anymore because you took out a graphic and you forgot to renumber the other graphics, something like that. Those are the only things that you should be changing at this point. You should not be doing anything substantial. But you do want to go over what the gold team asked you to do and make sure that those were all completed and to the satisfaction of the reviewers from gold team. Usually your white glove includes people from gold team. Um, and so you want to have that same, just double check because the proposal manager, as the proposal manager, you will have made those changes. So you want the capture manager, the technical lead, the leadership, whoever's in the white glove to be comfortable that the changes that you agreed to make at Gold Team have been made. You want to check for the layout. You want to check for, like I said, the numbering of tables and figures and exhibits. You want to make sure that they're all sequential. You want to make sure there's a call out. You want to make sure all of those things are very clear. You want to check that your headings haven't gotten changed along the way. So whatever outline you had at the beginning, your outline at the end should match unless you've made some strategic decision along the way that changed it. But that's one of the last things you want to do. Does the heading numbering match what I started with? Do my callouts in the headings for L and M and C that help the evaluators know what the information in that section is going to be? Make sure that all those things are clear. Do a last final check for compliance. And this is more of a high level check for compliance. You don't have time to go into the actual content in every section. But again, is my outline complete? Are all of my sections there that need to be there? Just a final check for compliance. And then one of the other things you need to check is your file size. Most government systems are restricted in what size documents they can receive. So portals, that doesn't necessarily come up so much, but in an email, it can come up. And so you may have to break your document up into pieces, hopefully not. If you've got a lot of graphics, that can sometimes be an issue. But you need to check for what it says in the RFP, the file sizes that they can accept are, and then you need to adjust your documents appropriately. You make any final changes, hopefully that's nothing substantial, and then the document should be ready to go. After White Glove, the proposal manager should be able to finalize the files for submission. You should make sure your files are named as required by the RFP. You should make sure your files are in the format required by the RFP. You may have been developing your proposal content in Word, for example, but the submission may be required to be in PDF. You should make sure your file sizes are acceptable based on the requirements of the RFP. Most government email systems can't accept large files, so you may need to break up your files into smaller chunks. You should make sure whoever is going to be submitting the proposal is aware of the files to be submitted. Usually, the contracts team is who submits proposals. Be sure to communicate with them often during the proposal process. When the files are ready, send them an email with a list of the files that should be submitted. Complicated proposals may have dozens of files that get submitted. Also, be sure to send them an email with instructions about how the proposal gets submitted. Is it a portal or an email, and to whom does the email go? And with instructions about where to find the files. They hopefully know this information, but it's always good to confirm with an email because obviously bad submission means your proposal doesn't get evaluated. So often you attach the files to the email that you send, but sometimes contracts prefers to pull the documents from whatever sharing servers you're currently using. Finally, you should confirm the contracts team understands the deadlines for submission and confirm when they are planning to submit. Post-submission, you're finally done. Congratulations. Now, you should make sure the proposal files are archived somewhere that not many people have access to. as a safety measure against corruption of the submitted files. You may need them for evaluation notices or final proposal revisions. So you need to make sure you have an uncorrupted copy of what you submitted. Last and not least, you should thank everyone who worked on the proposal. This is usually done via an email. It may come from the business development or growth leadership. It may come from the capture manager. It may come from the proposal manager, just to make sure it's done